For many years now, Bitcoin maximalists have pushed the idea of Bitcoin being an asset that is not just head and shoulders above every other asset, but one that is without competition, or might I even say, immune to competition. This narrative has been further reinforced by the fact that Bitcoin has literally held a perfect stranglehold on the #1 position of every single cryptocurrency market valuation ranking since its inception. But what if I told you that is simply just a narrative and nothing more? Bitcoin has competitors, and might I even say, a very serious competitor, in fact. But to understand which one it is, we have to first understand what makes Bitcoin special, because quite frankly, it actually is. You see, Bitcoin is neither simply special because of its near $2 trillion market valuation, nor its perfect #1 stranglehold on the market cap rankings, but because of the core architectural structure behind how it works. When Bitcoin's creator Satoshi Nakamoto created it, he did so with a few things in mind. Humans cannot be trusted. Humans will always follow their personal interest, and the desire to control money cannot be quenched. So, how do you create a form of money that cannot be controlled by anyone, is digital, and can be accessible to anyone with these 3 things in mind? Because quite frankly, that's what Bitcoin was created to be. And you can read the Bitcoin white paper to get yourself acclimated on the exact facts behind why Bitcoin was created. But to break it down simply, the solution Satoshi came up with was a decentralized system that consists of 4 major components: the nodes, the miners, an open source code, and of course, the users. Now, how does this all work? When a user sends a Bitcoin transaction, they broadcast it to an open network. Then the nodes, who are essentially thousands of computers that are running the Bitcoin software and store copies of the entire blockchain history, receive the transaction broadcast and copy it amongst each other. The transaction then gets placed in something known as a mempool, where a miner who just won the block creation competition in that moment can include it in their newly created block. The nodes then validate the block and all of the transactions inside of it before adding it to their copies of the entire blockchain history. Now, how this prevents any form of control over the network is pretty simple. The nodes enforce the rules, and any user of Bitcoin can pretty much run a node because the blockchain size is small enough to be fit into a personal computer. So remember, the nodes enforce the rules. The miners, on the other hand, ensure the blockchain stays secure. And they do this through a process called hashing, which actually leads towards block production, but that's a little complicated for this video. So I'd suggest you go learn how Bitcoin mining actually works on your own. But for the purpose of this video, I want to focus on the incentive structure that Satoshi created to keep Bitcoin out of the possibility of being co-opted by any central authority or rogue actor. So the miners earn Bitcoin for their participation in securing the network. So if you picture this, the users have a vested interest in keeping the value of their money secured. And the miners have a vested interest in making sure they earn block rewards. But every 4 years, the new supply of Bitcoin gets cut in half until every single one of the 21 million maximum supply of Bitcoin has been mined. And because of this, the miners progressively earn less and less Bitcoin as time goes on. So knowing this, Satoshi designed Bitcoin in such a way where the miners are rewarded to keep the network secure, but the powerful rule enforcement is left in the hands of the users. So this creates a form of checks and balance that keeps the network from being co-opted either by a central authority or a rogue actor. The Bitcoin code, well, it was also made open source so that it can be independently accessed by everyone and audited by anyone anytime. So this system is called a proof of work network security model, and it is what makes Bitcoin much more special than other networks such as Ethereum, Solana, XRP, etc., because it gives Bitcoin something called censorship-resistance. Ethereum and Solana use what's called a proof-of-stake network security model, which actually means that whoever owns the majority of the supply can pretty much co-opt the network in whatever direction they want. Their nodes are also extremely expensive and require massive storage capacity to run, so the average individual cannot remotely afford the kind of hardware that is needed to run one. This makes it impossible for everyday users to be able to participate in defending the network and keeping it decentralized, unlike in the case of Bitcoin, which I have just explained. So why is censorship resistance even remotely valuable? Well, if any cryptocurrency is ever gonna ascend to the point where nation states can use it as a form of payment settlement rail, then it must be 100% censorship resistant, 100% neutral, 100% decentralized, and thus 100% impossible to co-opt by a rogue adversary. So, if need be, nation states are far more likely to use Bitcoin over Ethereum, Solana, XRP, and the rest, thus making it more valuable. So now that you understand exactly what makes Bitcoin special, it is important to note that it's not the only one that possesses this special characteristic. Litecoin, Zcash, Monero, and Dogecoin are but a few very important cryptocurrencies that possesses it as well. They are proof of work, they give power of rule enforcement to users, they pay miners to secure the network, and are thus censorship resistant. What has separated Bitcoin from them so far, however, has been its relatively robust adoption and network effects. Put simply, Bitcoin has been used by far too many people relative to these other potential competitors, hence it has been way more valuable than them. However, over the past 8 years, something has started to change. One of these cryptocurrencies have been growing consistently and steadily when it comes to its adoption and network effects for almost a decade now. It's even gotten to a point where its adoption and usage seem inevitably poised to overtake that of Bitcoin in the coming years. That cryptocurrency? Litecoin. The Bitcoin competitor they don't want you to know about. Now, take a look at Zcash's network usage compared to that of Bitcoin. Here's what it looks like for Monero, and also take a look at what it looks like when it comes to Doge. Now, take a look at Litecoin's network usage when compared to it. You can clearly see the gradual organic growth in adoption and usage that Litecoin has been gaining over Bitcoin in a way that none of the other Bitcoin competitors have been able to. In 2018, Litecoin was averaging around 20,000 daily transactions, while Bitcoin was averaging between 200 and 300,000 transactions in the same time period. In 2026, however, Litecoin now processes just shy of an average of 200,000 daily transactions, while Bitcoin has been averaging roughly 400,000 daily transactions in the same time period. Litecoin has been able to grow roughly 10 times in daily users, while Bitcoin barely doubled. And as you can see, it looks well on pace to overtake it in the coming years. This is huge, but why aren't any of the mainstream finance talking heads talking about it? Well, the answer is very simple. You see, while Litecoin has been growing very steadily and very consistently in the terms of its adoption, its price has barely budged. While Bitcoin has already broken all-time highs back-to-back in the previous 2 cycles, Litecoin is still stuck below the price it was during the early months of 2017 as of today, March of 2026. So it simply hasn't been exciting enough for neutral talking heads to consider talking about it. As a result of this, however, Bitcoin maximalists have been taking total advantage of this situation to peddle a narrative that Bitcoin is in fact without any potential competitor, reducing the entire conversation to one of price alone, when in reality, adoption and usage should be the only real metrics that matter. They even resort to memetics such as Bitcoin's immaculate conception, which is essentially just an attempt to establish some form of mythical superiority for Bitcoin over the rest of its potential competitors due to the fact that, well, Bitcoin's founder, Satoshi, chose to remain anonymous, while others, such as Litecoin's founder, Charlie Lee, are well known by the public. Now, Litecoin also has another important edge over Bitcoin, which rests on the fact that its network is fundamentally more resilient than that of Bitcoin. How is this possible, you ask? Well, remember how I explained to you earlier that Bitcoin's network essentially pays miners to keep the network secure? Well, Litecoin works exactly like Bitcoin. I mean, it's quite literally a copy and paste of the Bitcoin's official code with some adjustments such as 4 times supply and 4 times speed, as well as some other upgrades that have been able to come to it over the past 14 plus years of its existence. But the core principle of paying miners to keep the network secure, as well as the progressively having new supply of it that Bitcoin has, also applies to Litecoin. So to refresh your memory, as this supply gets halved every 4 years or so in Bitcoin and Litecoin, well, miners are technically earning less and less. But to compensate for this, the price of Bitcoin and Litecoin can continue to double, which essentially means that the USD value that miners are actually earning just remains relatively flat. And, well, the number of miners can pretty much stay the same and continue to secure the network. However, in the years when Bitcoin is actually dropping and the prices aren't doubling in relation to the halving of the coins, well, the miners simply earn less. And what happens is that miners that are keeping the network secure just begin dropping off the network. Yeah, this is called a miner incentive problem that Bitcoin has been facing. However, Litecoin has been able to solve this effectively through something called merge mining. You see, Litecoin is actually mined alongside Doge, and this actually came into place since 2014 when Dogecoin decided to get merge mined with Litecoin, which, well, the Litecoin community gladly obliged. And because of this, whenever Litecoin miners are mining Litecoin, they actually get both Litecoin as well as Dogecoin at the same time without having to expend extra electricity, because yes, electricity and computational energy are being allocated in order to perform the mining process. This has allowed Litecoin to essentially become the first cryptocurrency network to go through something that I'd like to call a successful network security cost substitution. Now, this topic deserves an entire video on its own, and I will definitely be dropping an entire video for this topic in the near future, so go ahead and subscribe to this channel and turn on the post notifications so you do not miss out on that. But in a nutshell, for the first 7 years of Dogecoin's merge mining with Litecoin, well, Litecoin paid for the network security of both blockchains, because Litecoin was way more valuable than Dogecoin back then, and the daily issued Litecoin actually had way more value than those of the Dogecoins that were being mined. Miners were essentially making most of their profits from Litecoin, hence securing Dogecoin mostly with the profits and proceeds that came from their Litecoin operation. But ever since Dogecoin went on the generational massive bull run of 2021, its valuation and thus the valuation of the newly daily issued Dogecoin block rewards have been mostly paying for the network security for both chains. So now you understand it. The first ever case of successful network security cost substitution between two independent blockchains. And what this ensures is that whenever Bitcoin gets into the problem where, of course, price can always double every 4 years. It's just impractical, with Bitcoin now being way above $1.7 trillion in market valuation as of the time I was recording this video. The absurdity of doubling price every 4 years, it just doesn't make sense. The math doesn't add up, because, well, that's 3.4 trillion and 6.8 trillion, and you see where it's going. So inevitably, the Bitcoin miners will be dropping off the Bitcoin network as the mining rewards that they get reduced. However, Litecoin miners are most likely going to stay because, of course, Litecoin can substitute the cost of its network security with Dogecoin. And it doesn't end at Dogecoin. Litecoin also has so many other cryptocurrencies in what it's called the Scrypt hashing algorithm, which is essentially not something you have to think too much about. It's just the software Litecoin employs in making sure its mining actually happens. But yeah, Litecoin is merge mined with not just Dogecoin, but Bellscoin, Pepecoin, Luckycoin, Junkcoin, as well as a few other Scrypt coins that it can substitute its network security costs with. And this is a huge ecosystem on its own, and it's something that is definitely an inevitable conversation that is bound to happen in the cryptocurrency space at some point, and something that like I have explained and like I am stating, gives Litecoin's network a significantly better practical resilience over that of Bitcoin. To further complicate matters for Bitcoin, there's another coin that is actually mined using the same hashing algorithm as Bitcoin, known as Bitcoin Cash, but its relationship with it is more of a cannibalistic one, which means that it actually most likely will end up losing a lot of miners to this other coin should it begin growing in network valuation. But of course, that's for a separate video, and I'm definitely going to be dropping that in the future, so you definitely need to subscribe. Now, all in all, one very important thing to note is that although Litecoin is in fact a competitor with Bitcoin, technically, most of the success of the network has actually been geared towards helping Bitcoin progress. I mean, quite frankly, it is literally the only cryptocurrency in the entire cryptocurrency space that has actually furthered advancements that practically benefited Bitcoin. And one of them is Segwit, which actually led to Bitcoin's transactions being more efficient. Another one, of course, is Lightning, which is another topic for another day, but it was another advancement that really helped Bitcoin. And so Litecoin has this practical relationship with Bitcoin where it actually furthers Bitcoin's development, and it actually serves as this brother that really helps Bitcoin grow, while at the same time technically competing with it for users in a way that, well, they're both equally as valuable as the users that are transacting on them and are using them as monetary networks. So to conclude this video, Bitcoin in fact has a competitor. And although market valuation and price right now might not reflect this, it's important to note that that competitor is Litecoin, and the facts are clear.